remembering you in my prayer. Hope you are more pain-free every day.
Pearl McFeeters doesn't remember the car accident on September 3rd that totaled her vehicle and broke nearly every bone in her body. The 82-year-old Aiken woman suffered a broken nose, 7 broken ribs, a shattered heel, and wrists. But she does remember being shocked to find out it was an Aiken County Sheriff's deputy who was in the other car.
So, especially one who was supposed to be knowing how to drive.
McFeeters was traveling south on Highway 12 when the accident happened. She was making a left-hand turn into this private driveway when an Aiken County Sheriff's deputy coming in the opposite direction at a high rate of speed collided with her vehicle.
From there, that's where they first seen her, is where that car is, that white now, where they first seen her here.
The impact of the crash sent both cars spinning off the road.
Her car was pushed down in here, and then their car took out the mailboxes, came across the highway and ended up over there.
According to a State Patrol investigation, Deputy Bruce Beck was driving at 94 miles per hour when he saw McFeeters from 200 feet away. He slammed on his brakes but could not stop in time. The deputy was not responding to an emergency and did not display lights or sirens. The investigation found if he had not been speeding, the accident could have been avoided.
Well, you get kind of angry inside. You really do. You can't help but get angry to think that it possibly could have been avoided.
Shirley McGurr is worried her once active mother will be permanently disabled from the accident. The family is considering taking legal action.
You know, I mean, if we were speeding, well, then it's, you know, I don't know, you're held responsible, and especially if you're involved in an accident and injure someone, we'd have to pay for it, and they certainly should be held responsible.
Meanwhile, McFeeters, who spent her time helping others by serving meals on wheels and driving friends on errands, now faces at least 7 more weeks in the hospital and reconstructive surgery, leaving her family wondering if this Good Samaritan will now have to rely on others for help. In Aiken, Amy Rutledge, News 6.
Any time of the day, there could be children coming to and from school, and even on weekends because of the playground equipment in schools. You know, at schools, we want people to be aware that they need to be careful in those areas.
The vast majority of the Americans.
President Clinton outlined his health care package to the nation last night, speaking of stable, universal coverage for the entire country.
Giving every American health security, health care that can never be taken away, health care that is always there. That is what we must do tonight.
Today, Minnesota's Republican Governor Arnie Carlson expressed concern with the president's plan, saying universals that help other states could hurt Minnesota.
I'm very fearful that what the feds will do is what they've always done, is reward the inefficient and punish the efficient. So I don't want to see Minnesotans having to subsidize a national plan because they've been efficient.
More are concerned about how truly equal coverage can be accomplished without raising taxes or bankrupting the country.
Because in reality, folks, what they're proposing right now does not contain enough costs to really assure us that everyone who gets this card is going to get the same health insurance for everyone.
That effective reform will not come about unless the senators and congressmen have to have the same plan as Joe Average does. And when that happens, then maybe we'll get a decent health care reform proposal out of the Congress.
Clinton's rallying cry has only started the next round of the national debate over health care. Months of congressional hearings and fiery debate are still ahead. But once the specifics are ironed out, Bill Clinton will sign the most important legislation of his presidency, with a health security card in every pot.
It will cover people for hospital care, doctor visits, emergency and lab services, diagnostic services like pap smears and mammograms and cholesterol tests, substance abuse, and mental health treatment.
Derek Hines, News 6.
Oh, I don't think there's any question about it.
Jim Gustafson's not the only one who thinks the steelworkers' decision to strike was a mistake.
We were all surprised a bit when they went out on strike, and even more surprised that when an offer was forthcoming from the company and it was rejected. I think that was really the turning point.
Even though the decision to strike is being called a tactical blunder by industry analysts and government leaders, union officials are standing behind it.
Well, I've been in strikes for this probably about my third or fourth time. And it always seems if it drags on for a long period of time, people start thinking that, hey, the union's at fault here. But the thing that you have to take into consideration is that if the union wouldn't have been in here fighting for the things that we've always believed in, the economy and the living standards in the good old USA wouldn't be what they are today.
But neither is the mining industry. A spokesman for the industry, who did not want to be identified, fearing bad relations, said he can't understand why the union would take a hardline stance when, quote, everyone realizes National Steel is not competitive in Minnesota or the world market. The union and management worked side by side for over a year to cut costs. Now a company spokesman says the two sides have never been wider apart and are headed for disaster. He also told News 6 District Director Dave Foster was the one who initially refused to accept an August 7th contract offer from the company, wanting to wait until a settlement pattern had been set. That's when it all came crashing down. 47 days into the strike, workers tried to go back to their jobs. National went looking for new supplies.
As of currently, there is no labor agreement. So under this arrangement, we are refusing our workers to come back to work until we have a signed labor agreement.
In the end, the question is who wins and who loses from a potential national shutdown. If other Iron Range mining companies gain a portion of National's pellet purchases, those firms and their workers are more secure. So who loses? The 600 workers at National who find themselves out of a job. In Duluth, Amy Rutledge, News 6.
When the final count was taken, the district came up 335 students short of projections. Each of those kids loses the district about $3,200 in state per pupil payments, and the unexpected loss is forcing the rearrangement of teaching staff. Those rearrangements are expected to cause more problems in an already troubled district.
We've had a tremendous amount of change. We had 100 retirements over the summer. We've had 500 requests for internal transfer. We closed 5 buildings. Almost everybody's in a new place, and we need to work hard on trying to develop and improve morale among employees in the district.
An investigation shows the students who've left the district have gone to a variety of other places. Some have moved out of town. Others have taken advantage of open enrollment to leave the confusion in Duluth to move to other more stable districts, while still others have moved their children into private schools.
Quality is the issue. If we can develop quality back into those schools, we're going to get the students back. And that's the primary theme that we have to work on.
The other thing administrators are working on is bringing back into the system older kids who have dropped out. They've targeted some 200 high school-age students who, if they could develop programs that fit their schedules, they could lure back, thereby making up the $1 million shortfall.
Spokesmen say the biggest problem they've got is a loss of public confidence in the district's ability to provide a sound education. They say if they can convince parents that their kids will indeed get a good education here, their problems will be solved. At the Central Administration Building in Duluth, Barbara Riles, News 6.
Without adding any to our property tax bills, we would then be able to pay off the school district debt, which is about $4.6 million, and establish a permanent fund balance or a reserve for the school district that will eliminate much of the need for short-term borrowing.
So we see that many of the details of the Clinton plan, many of the principles are the same that we've been working on here in Minnesota for the last 2 years formally since the legislation came through.
The Indian farmers have to go to Cargill and they have to go to W.R. Grace and get permission from them. They have to buy their seeds from them. If they want to change the seeds, make any kind of hybridizations of them, they have to go and ask the patent holders for permission. Whereas for the last 2,000 years, they've been doing this.
Dealing with feelings, how are you going to get across setting, word usage? Those are the types of things you had to come up with.
For most of the day, you'll find Dennis Sauter teaching 8th and 9th grade English at Carleton High School. But for 1 hour a day, he spends his time behind the desk in the principal's office.
It's a lot more responsibility than we had before, but it's been interesting.
Sauter is one of 8 teachers splitting the workload of one principal. The experiment began this fall as a way to save money. The school is faced with a $300,000 budget shortfall. By eliminating a principal's salary, it will save nearly $60,000 this year.
It's working out very well. I'm very enthusiastic about the discipline has been much better this year. I'm enthusiastic by the way the kids have been accepting it because we explained the system to them early in the game and they're buying into it, or they seem to be.
Teachers say because students see them every day in the classroom, one of the benefits of this new arrangement is a visit to the principal's office is now less stressful.
That before, I don't know if they had the chance to come in to talk to the principal about something minor. Now they have an opportunity to talk to 7 or 8 people about something they don't like. And it might not be a problem, but at least they have a feeling, I think, that they can talk to somebody and it's dealt with.
And I see the students becoming more closer to the teachers, you know.
But teachers admit group leadership does have its downside.
It does take teaching time away at times. If we get caught at the end of an hour and have to do something, we might be a few minutes late, and that does take teaching time away. And it's not the best situation, but it's the best one we have for right now.
Overall, teachers here say the program has been successful, but they've adopted a wait-and-see attitude as to how it will work for the long term. And with other schools faced with similar budget problems, many are also keeping a close eye on this program to see whether or not it succeeds. In Carleton, Amy Rutledge, News 6.
And look how crooked they are. They're little things that as a whole you're going to get a
The families and friends will be there in the first month or two to help, deal with the hardship, and then down the line, there's just everybody figures that you can buck up and get on with your life, and it's not really the case.
Day
are making the first step to prevent pollution instead of fight pollution. And I believe that the pulp and paper industry was one of those industries which we were very much concerned as far as the water pollution.
Using the latest high-tech equipment, the SRFI plant takes office scrap like this and produces pulp suitable for high-quality white paper. And unlike a bleaching process, it's done without creating dioxins, some of the most dangerous chemicals known.
The majority of the process is done mechanically. We, for all intents and purposes, rub the fibers together and scrape the ink off as opposed to using chemicals.
120 tons of waste paper each year will go through this de-inking machine, one of several steps needed to create the pulp destined for nearby paper-making plants. The paper plants will then take this pulp and combine it with virgin pulp, reducing the pressure on our forests.
People finally realize that there is a limit for everything. And supply specifically, I mean for the paper industry, is the forests. And we are losing forests very fast. If we don't find a new source of material, the raw material, I believe that the country really will be facing quite a problem in a very near future. This is the answer to that problem.
Students from Homecroft Elementary School left their books behind and took their class on the road today to the Rice Lake Township Fire Hall. For many of these third graders, it's their first up-close look at firefighters and what it takes to do their job. But today's outing is less a field trip than it is an important lesson in fire safety.
What would start the fire? What would actually start a fire? Go ahead. Matches. Matches. That's a real important one. We'll talk more about that one in just a little bit.
Les Miller is teaching this group about forest fire prevention, from building a safe campfire to tips students can take home to their parents.
That's right. Just that one cigarette out the window might start a forest or grass fire. So if they put it out in the ashtray, then that would be a safe place for that cigarette to go.
Firefighters say the #1 thing children should be taught is how to get out of a burning house, something many don't know how to do. Firefighters say education and practice is key.
Okay, when you come up to the door here, you don't want to open up the door. You want to feel if the door's hot. You feel with your hand if it's hot and the door handle's hot. Don't go through because there's fire on the other side.
They need to know it is real. It is dangerous. It's not like on TV. It's not like a movie.
Dale Rogers, a Homecroft teacher and volunteer firefighter, organized today's event, prompted by the tragic losses he's seen firsthand.
I have been to a couple of fires where children have lost their lives, and it kind of hurts. And I remember one time particularly, I just cried.
While events like today's are important, firefighters say parents also need to go over these lessons at home with students, as practice could save their lives. In Rice Lake Township, Amy Rutledge, News 6.
Under law, I believe they're required to, but we also admit that there's some overzealous operator sometimes with that whistle that sometimes gets a little annoying.
The race for Minnesota's governor may be more than a year away, but those wanting to fill the political position are already hitting the campaign trail.
This year's legislative session doesn't get underway until late February, and many gubernatorial candidates are taking advantage of this late start to get a head start on winning votes. Former state party chair Todd Otis plans to announce his candidacy late November.
I think that people want to campaign long and hard, and in my case, I'll be going for my party's endorsement and adhering to that. But it's a big state. There are a lot of people to talk to, so I think that accounts for why people start pretty early.
Hennepin County Attorney Mike Freeman has already announced his candidacy.
Political analysts say Freeman is a visible candidate with a strong hold in the metro area. The son of a former Minnesota governor, Freeman has a prominent reputation as a crime fighter that could give him an edge. State Senator John Marty is the second DFLer to officially enter the race. Marty has a reputation for clean politics, and after the controversy surrounding this year's legislative session, Marty's ethics could win him votes.
I want to make sure that our tax system is fair. And I frankly think the public understands that people who make a little bit more money or a lot more money ought to pay a little bit more in taxes.
Former State Commerce Commissioner and DFL Chair Mike Hatch is running an exploratory campaign at this point. And then, of course, there's the Perpich factor. Supporters of former Governor Rudy Perpich have opened a campaign headquarters in Hibbing, expecting him to run again next year. But Perpich isn't committing himself. He says he won't decide until after the 1994 legislative session. And as for current Governor Arnie Carlson, he too is playing the waiting game.
I don't think I'm going to make any re-election announcement until the session is over. But I do wish them well, and I wish more would get into the race.
In Duluth, Stephanie Guadian, News 6.
It sped by for whatever. He assumed very definitely that it was
These are, in many cases, as Frank has pointed out, young, unless we take some strong actions on on preventing gangs at the city limits of Milwaukee or Madison. The message for gangs is very simple, that your time is up. You will either change your behavior and we will provide mechanisms for you to do that, or we will provide stiff sanctions for the activities that you're engaging in which harm our communities, which breed fear and violence for citizens and particularly for young people in our communities. As well as some statutory changes. So, Frank?
Yes, as a result of Senator Paula's initiatives over a year ago and his ability to have the foresightedness.
Continuing part of the membership, people have to engage in this type of activity, drive-by shooting or something of that nature. It is oftentimes part of the indoctrination process to bring a person in. And what that does, it means, first of all, it's very hard to track down people to find out whether in fact they've been involved.
One reason why Brad and I wanted to, and Chris here, try to get this.
The last thing in the world is we want to have is what's happened around the country to the larger cities, and even cities as the size of Duluth and smaller that have actually had these organized efforts to create violence.
These young kids that are involved in pushing and shoving and just minor things at young levels, they end up to be the juveniles and gang members later, and end up to be the abuse people later on in life that end up killing their mates.
And I really feel it is better for us to err on the side of being overzealous in fighting crime in our community than to err on the side of being complacent.
When Evelyn Mines laid off 173 workers last year, the Minnesota Job Service sponsored a retraining program preparing workers for new careers. 30 to 40 of those workers were called back by the mine as vacation relief. Others found new employment, from working at Potlatch to selling cars. But there remains a number of unemployed workers who are involved in long-term job training, and some have left the Northland altogether. With these statistics, the future for national steelworkers is sketchy at best.
When you have plant shutdowns like this, frequently you see such things as alcoholism on the rise, abuse in the home on the rise, divorces. A lot of bad things come with these kind of dislocations. And so we want to get the agencies in quick.
An open meeting will be held on Friday at 10 a.m. at the Regency Hotel in Hibbing, with job training and college representatives on hand. While officials hold hope for the idling plant to resume production, they say they must open up new job opportunities for some 700 unemployed workers. And even with last month's unemployment rate in northeastern Minnesota at 6.3%, Reagan says he's optimistic about job opportunities in the Northland.
They have great mechanical skills, many of them, because of the nature of their job that they've been working on, and the fact that a lot of people live the life in the woods, hunting, fishing, and so forth. They're good with motors, boats, all kinds of things.
Steelworkers will receive $75 to $100 a week plus unemployment benefits through May, but the ripple effect of the mine closure will reach beyond them, hitting support industries hard throughout the range. A Thursday morning meeting is scheduled between Kewatton's mayor and Oberstar staffers to formulate a plan for hundreds of dislocated workers. In Duluth, Derek Hines, News 6.
National Steel Pellet is one of Minnesota Power's largest customers. The indefinite closure of the plant will undoubtedly have a severe impact on the Northland utility, an impact that so far is totaling a $1 million a month loss.
Minnesota Power officials say they've been preparing for this outcome ever since the strike at National Steel in Keewatin began, and now they must consider their options to counter their loss.
The list includes selling more electricity to taconite producers that pick up National Steel's production, selling more electricity to people throughout the Midwest, containing company cost, and the possibility of a rate increase. But officials stress the rate increase is just one of many options being considered at this point.
Number one, it's very difficult to decide what kind of rate increase. That depends on all sorts of facts and figures that we are looking at, obviously, and so one doesn't know. When is also a very difficult question to answer.
And despite a more than $2 a share drop in company stock, Herbach says one option not being considered is employee cutbacks.
We have heard rumors, as one would, because of this kind of impact, but we are quite assured that there's no consideration and that it's simply rumor and that there's no talk about this. There's no consideration of anything of the kind.
Friday was the deadline for National to sign a cheaper electricity contract with Minnesota Power, but no such contract was signed. In Duluth, Stephanie Guadian, News 6.
The value is to help seniors to learn health and safety information so that they can live more independent lives.
And what's she?
Was an angel.
The wording in the memo sent home to parents isn't cut and dried, but the meaning is clear. Good is okay, evil is not.
This is the kind of thing you won't see at Nettleton School this year. There'll be no open sores and no need for fake blood.
The note recommends that students choose costumes that do not depict violence, include weapons, or have gory themes.
We don't want our children to not have Halloween. What we want is our children to have Halloween that excludes the violence that we've been seeing, that excludes the goriness, that excludes the things that relate to social problems.
Some of the kids like the idea.
Well, I think it's a good policy because the little kids in the building, they won't get like scared and...
But some others feel it's taken the fun out of Halloween.
I like to dress up as scary stuff sometimes, but if we can, it's going to be kind of boring.
Principal Bergman says he hasn't heard any feedback from parents since he sent the note home over a week ago. But some people we talked with as they bought Halloween costumes questioned the concept.
I think that they should be able to do whatever they want. I mean, if the kids want to go dressed up as, I don't know, Jason on Friday the 13th, then let them. I mean, it's all part of Halloween. It's part of the fun. That's it.
In Duluth, Barbara Riles, News 6.
The federal government is one of the nation's biggest paper consumers at over 250,000 tons a year. And northeastern Minnesota has always been a significant player in the sales. But as the White House takes on a new shade of green, a new presidential executive order may leave the Northlands paper companies out in the cold.
The problem with the president's executive order is that it moves too far, too fast, and will in essence preclude Minnesota manufacturers from selling paper to the federal government.
Wanting to cut down on government waste, the federal government will now only purchase paper containing 20% recycled material. The Northlands paper companies have been successful at achieving only half that.
But getting to 20% is a quantum leap from 10.
A leap Northland paper companies say they can't make because they produce high-quality paper and don't have the technology to use recycled materials. Brandt says the new proposal may in fact stop companies from investing in recycling altogether.
So if the federal government is going to consume the same amount of paper and require that that paper contain these levels of post-consumer waste, it's not recognizing the increased cost of developing the plants.
The president's executive order is not etched in stone, let alone paper. Industry officials say while on the right track, they hope to slow down the new recycling standard, allowing time for technology to catch up. In Duluth, Amy Rutledge, News 6.
Hundreds of city workers invited city councilors to meet with them on the status of contract negotiations.
We want to discuss some of the issues that we see are preventing a resolution to the contract. And we want to express our frustration with the length of time that has taken to resolve this contract.
The city's basic unit of employees have been without a contract for over a year and say the administration has not been working toward a resolution.
I think they had some frustrations to air. I think that there's a great deal of intrepidation about the security of their jobs.
The hiring of temporary workers is still at the forefront of the disagreement, but union negotiators say the two sides remain far apart. In Duluth, Derek Hines, News 6.
Grandma's hat? Grandma's baby. Kyle, let's have a testing run. Huh? Are you upstairs and there's 3 more games upstairs? Are you home tonight?
When I practiced, I got over $1. I got 10 cents otherwise.
Even though students know a lot about AIDS and other sexually transmitted diseases, in our surveys we find that they aren't all practicing safer sex. Only about 40% of students are using condoms regularly.
cancer problems. He was having all kinds of other problems, so there were two.
It was Bravo 141. They shot up a couple of their vehicles.
Let me draw like a map. Here's a building, okay? And we'll call this, say, 2 miles away, okay?
I was shot with a 25 millimeter round in the back on February 27th, friendly fire. I have a hole in my back approximately now, about that size. Originally, the hole was about that big and about that deep. I want them to acknowledge and take responsibility and take care of us.
I need you to talk. Want him talking on this?
Yeah, that's fine. Treatments, I mean the medical care and everything, the denial of what's happened. Like I said, all my other options have been failing. The VA has failed me, the Army has failed me.
Right.
Congressmen and senators, liaisons aren't doing quite as much as I felt that they would.
Well, somebody driving without insurance, if they're involved in an accident, and they're running the risk of losing everything.
Officials say more and more people are taking that costly risk, driving without insurance. And with the arrival of winter in the Northland, the odds are against uninsured drivers. Minnesota's no-fault law is clear. All registered vehicles must have insurance, and all drivers must carry proof of that insurance.
The concept was good. If everybody has insurance and we have no uninsured drivers and everybody goes to their own policy to collect, then insurance should be cheaper. Problem is, not everybody has insurance.
It's a problem hitting Northland drivers in the pocketbook. Those who do have insurance end up paying the price for those who don't through high premiums. And officials say it's difficult to keep track of who has insurance and who doesn't.
You can walk down to the License Bureau and they can say, give us your policy number. You can give them a fictitious number, a name of a company like Farmers Insurance or State Farm, and you get your plates.
And many people get away with this fraud. That is, until they make a mistake.
We find many people that are driving without that proof of insurance in the vehicle, and the easiest thing for us to do is just to write them a ticket and force them to prove to the court that they have it, because there are loopholes.
If you do decide to gamble and drive without insurance, make sure and bring a checkbook along. The fine for no auto insurance can run as high as $700 and cost you your driver's license. In Duluth, Stephanie Guadian, News 6.
$259.5.
Awesome, Colt.
Yeah!
Craig Colkin is a happy hunter. At 8:45 this morning, he bagged what could very well be the biggest shoot of the day, a 259.5-pound, 16-point buck.
Where did you bag this one?
Right behind the house.
Really?
Yes.
Out behind the house you live?
Right in my backyard.
Quarter mile out.
Quarter mile back in the woods.
Colkin dropped the buck from over 100 yards with his .308. Without a doubt, Mother Nature's blanket of snow makes tracking easier. But what about the comfort zone?
Well, I try and be as comfortable as you can. Dress for it. Hand warmers, foot warmers.
There are 14 new regulations for the 1993 hunting season. They're all listed in here, this pamphlet that's put out by the Department of Natural Resources. You get it free when you get your hunting license. One new regulation this year is geared towards the younger generation.
Any hunter that is 16 or younger that buys a regular deer license can take either a doe or a buck without a doe permit.
Why do you think it was created?
Well, probably to encourage young hunters to get out and practice hunting.
This is your first year to go hunting, huh?
Yeah.
You having a good time so far?
Yeah.
It's a little cold.
Yeah, I know, I'm freezing my fingers. Just a few miles up the road at Island Lake Inn, Steve Kaler shoveled the driveway, waiting for more deer to be weighed in.
We have a big buck contest. It's $5 per contestant. It's you can't enter it anymore. It had been midnight last night, and it goes to top 4 weights.
How much will the heaviest deer bring in?
About $200.
$259.5. Yep. Wow. Even though Colkin didn't enter the weigh-in contest, he's still happy with his first kill. Other enthusiasts, both old and new, have 15 days left to prove their hunting skills. Reporting from North Duluth, Chip Wallace, News 6.
Can be.
Many years ago, we got cut out of the Food for Peace and the government cargoes due to the lack of U.S. ocean-going flag service to the Great Lakes. Now it looks, because of this legislation, it looks as though we're going to be back into the business, or at least we will be back in a position where we can compete for the business.
Like to bring out is that we are probably the only agent guidance from the bottom, and that's where, like, Roy is the supervisor. Yeah. He's the one.
Well, we know that even if none of the governmental units raise property taxes, it means that property taxes are still going to go up because the Department of Revenue came in and raised valuations, at least within the city of Duluth.
But it will not give us any money to, doing the administrative or technical work.
I think one other thing, too, that we're throwing in.
Through promotions and play areas, children are the main target of fast food restaurants. Now the industry is under the gun to provide a healthier environment for their youngest consumers.
The fast food industry now for two reasons. The EPA report that identifies chemicals in secondhand smoke as known carcinogens with no safe level of exposure, and fast food restaurants because that's a lot of places where the family frequents and small children.
People like Tammy Burkhofer, who takes her son to a fast food restaurant nearly once a week.
I think it's wonderful.
How come?
Because I think the secondhand smoke is bad and it bothers me, I know.
Minnesota is among 16 other states pushing for the smoking ban. But critics say the fast food industry should not be used as an experiment for public policy. That if states want it passed, they should take it to the lawmakers, where it can be debated fairly. This restaurant manager agrees with the ban, saying it's another sign of society's growing intolerance of smoking. But Dave Green admits he's concerned about losing customers as a result.
To some degree, yes. I mean, I think that there is going to be a backlash, and people are going to feel that their rights are being infringed on, as well as, people who have to breathe secondary smoke are going to.
Surprisingly, the smokers we spoke with today were not upset at the idea. They say they come to fast food restaurants not to smoke, but to eat.
As long as I'm in here eating, it doesn't bother me. When I go outside, I'll have a cigarette.
Hardee's in Superior has recently gone smoke-free. Management says they've received a few negative comments from smoking customers, many of whom are now choosing to go through the drive-thru. But overall, they say, reaction has been positive. Those pushing for the ban hope other restaurants will soon follow suit. Amy Rutledge, News 6.
join the saying of our Pledge of Allegiance.
Honor guard, pin up.
You just think, well, you're one of the lucky ones that can be here to observe this thing. And many that don't, can't. It's the sad part of the whole thing.
And the first thing that pops into my head is, yeah, if you go get professional help, I'd be willing to help you.
Staggering, and not only are they staggering, but they're devastating for families that attempt to recover from those kinds of problems. And that's why
He's been a good provider.
Gambling and have more money to spend at Christmas, who will use on occasion Christmas club accounts or savings accounts, who had been designated for Christmas buying, and if there's $200 in that, they think they can make that into $400 and be able to lavish their family with all these gifts because they made the money gambling. And of course what happens, most of them lose it. When they lose it, now that guilt goes up even further.
The explosion yesterday at the Idle Viking plant is not the first serious accident of this nature the Northland has seen. In November of 1989, a similar explosion killed 2 Iron Range men. The accident happened when 200,000 pounds of outdated explosives the men were working on exploded. The case is now in appeals court.
This case points out the failure of our system to ride herd on these people out there that are taking a cheap shot, to cut corners and playing with the lives of our citizenry.
Ed Matinich is a Hibbing lawyer representing the families of the victims involved in the 1989 accident. Matinich says Ronald Fields, the man currently employed as Viking Safety Compliance Officer, was Nitrochem's plant manager at the time of their explosion.
He was their manager, and he was the individual, I believe the record will show, went to the DNR and picked up a burn permit stating that his company, Nitrochem, would only be involved in the burning of sticks and paper on the date of November 3rd, 1989.
But Matinich says Fields gave the order to do more than burn sticks and paper. He says Fields had 2 of his workers begin burning ammonium nitrate. Matinich maintains the workers were not told how to do their job safely. Ultimately, their ignorance cost them their lives. Matinich draws similarities between the men killed during the 1989 accident and the 3 men killed yesterday in the explosion at Aurora.
I would doubt very seriously that any of those 3 individuals, those young men are out there, had any familiarity with the product or its dangerous propensities.
That will be up to authorities to decide. Officials say there will now be an investigation to determine whether or not the Viking Explosive Company or the firm it contracted took the necessary safety precautions. Safety precautions which may have saved the lives of 3 Northland men. Stephanie Guadian, News 6. Stephanie Guadian, NBC News.
I think Chris just graduated last year from UMD.
Crime is an issue that many people are concerned about, and I wanted to learn more about what's going on here in Duluth to try to increase public safety.
I was at Go-Finds by the bridge in the toy department stacking toys. In those days I was the head toy buyer at our discount department store on Garfield Avenue, and when he was shot, they came and called me out, and we went up to the office and we turned on the TV set.
what's gonna, if there's other things that are gonna surface. I mean, these are pretty minor league things, but actually with the Spirit, I think Russell and his crew are excellent, but it's just weird. So it's 4 authorities Thursday night. With the deck deal, when we were sitting there talking about what the deck's going to be doing, and they showed us their budget, I asked them about where the budget was for the management of Bayfront Park, where that was in it, and they said, well, we haven't placed it in there yet. So there's a real assumption that they're going to get this contract.
Well, there's no management deal with the deck. So Councillor Atkins is incorrect. I asked the deck if they would be interested in perhaps operating it and submitting a proposal, which they have done. In perhaps operating it and submitting a proposal, which they have done.
Employees, or is it a
All of them.
corporate? All of them.
All of them.
Yeah.
What we had done is we had a scrap drive this summer, and this is Cypress gave. I'd like to present this check on behalf of the people of Cypress North Shore Mining, and this is from the all the people. A check for $2,500.
Somebody ought to be responsible. Sure, this is true. It's always been a problem in Duluth.
Now, the fact that you have to walk down the middle of the street as opposed to walking on the sidewalk, isn't that a major inconvenience?
Could be dangerous, too.
I argued today that I don't think probable cause to hold him exists yet. Now, it may down the line, they may demonstrate evidence that, that he's responsible for this.
Right. Manufacturing and sales. Then, of course, people would say, well, if they've got it, oh, you apply for that first.
You apply for that first.
Oh.
That's good for a permit for
any one of these assault rifles.
I think they're a bunch of liars. We don't need another bill. We got over 20,000 on the books now. What we do need is some criminal control. There shouldn't be any controls. Any gun, if it's misused, you jump on the person, put them in jail. Put them away.
Robert, we understand that there's been an ongoing dispute over a period of years between the NTSB and the FAA regarding this particular type of aircraft, the British Aerojet Jetstream 31. Can you tell us a little bit about what's going on between these federal agencies?
Well,
It all started after a 1989 crash in Pasco, Washington that killed 6, same model airplane, and they believed that it was ice on the tail that brought that plane down, on the tail in particular now. They already started then talking about what might be a fix. While that was going on in 1991, another commuter crash occurred in Hard Landing in Beckley, West Virginia. That injured 16 people. It was pretty serious. They also believed that that was ice on the tail. So now they thought they had a problem. You get a buildup of ice on the tail in this model plane, and the nose tends to pitch down. This is on landing. So they recommended a fix, and the recommended fix was that when pilots come in through ice, that they don't put their wing flaps down as far as you normally would in coming into land, that you put them down less than halfway normal. And they thought that was fix enough. Some people wanted to go further. They rejected that. If this crash turns out to have been, if that turns out to be the cause, then obviously that fix was not enough.
And they should be able to tell that, because on impact, the flaps will probably freeze in the position in which they were when they were landing. Is that your understanding?
Oh yeah, that doesn't take them very much time at all to determine where the flaps were set. But now let's say the pilots were following the correct instruction, that they had the flaps set no greater than 20 degrees. If they determine that, then that suggests that what they thought was the fix, 20 degrees, is not fix enough. One other interesting thing I ought to tell you, the people at the FAA tell me that they had a report from a pilot who went in before this plane, who landed. And he reported icing conditions from 7,000 feet down to the ground. So there was some warning of these conditions. I mean, number one, that tells you what the conditions were. Number two, that tells you that if these pilots coming in were listening, that they would have heard that too.
Well, a pilot of Flight 5719 may not have heard that transaction, but the tower, the Duluth Air Traffic Control Tower, would have obviously been the tower to hear that. Shouldn't they have been under obligation then to pass that on to this pilot so that he had a good understanding of what he was going into?
Yeah, no question about that. And we don't know whether the pilots would have overheard the other pilots because they might have been far enough out that they were on another radio frequency at the time or something like that. I don't know exactly the timing of when that first pilot report came. But yes, the tower would be under an obligation to pass it on and may very well have. We just don't know that much yet.
And of course, the final decision on whether or not a plane is going to land is made by the pilot, who is in ultimate control.
Yeah, no, it always comes down to the pilot. That's where the buck stops.
Robert, I'm wondering, there seemed to have been some agreement then between the NTSB and the FAA on a fix as to where they put the flaps and so on, but I understood there was still a dispute. Did the NTSB want further steps taken?
Yeah, there was a dispute. Frankly, I'm not sure how important that is, but on some models of this plane, they recommended that you put a mandatory stop on the flaps so that they couldn't in any event be lowered more than 30 degrees. Now, as I say, the recommendation was that the pilots going through ice don't lower them more than 20 degrees. That's why I'm not so sure how important that other one is. But the NTSB wanted, they only make recommendations. They wanted the FAA to order this mandatory lock in there or something so that the flaps couldn't be lowered more than 30 degrees. FAA looked at it. They had British Air, the manufacturers of the plane, perform some flight tests and all, and they decided that wasn't necessary. The NTSB thought that was unacceptable, so there was an argument, still is.
Another question that had been raised was that there are two separate switches in this type of plane, one to boot the ice out of the tail and another one to boot the ice out of the wing flaps. Some had suggested they should be on one switch. Would that have made it easier for a pilot under these circumstances?
Could have. Now, I tell you, it's hard to say exactly how this plane was outfitted, but the way I understand that dispute, you got a little toggle switch in the cockpit, and this boot that you talk about is a protective device on the leading edge of the wings and the leading edge of the wings on the tail, which is to say the horizontal stabilizer. And you shoot some air into this boot, and it inflates a little bit, and it chips the ice off the front of the wing. If you throw this toggle switch one way, it does the wing. If you throw it another way, on some models, it does the tail. So the suggestion was, well, it's too easy for the pilots to accidentally do just the wing and forget about the tail. And so there was a recommendation that you make that one switch that does them both. I don't think that was ever done.
And finally, my last question in our last few seconds here, Robert, is Congressman Oberstar, who is chairman of the Aviation Subcommittee, has suggested that depending on the outcome of the investigation in Hibbing, he could call for a congressional investigation. What would that do?
Well, frankly, I don't think it would make a whole lot of difference. In South Dakota, when the governor was killed in that crash there, their politicians called for a big congressional investigation. But in the end, the investigators do their work, and the professionals at the FAA do their work. And I think the hearing, well, I guess it would put federal authorities on notice and maybe make them more anxious.
All right, Robert Haggard, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Barbara.
So do I need to be saying anything? It is a valuable historical artifact, and one of the conditions of it remaining in Wisconsin is that it be preserved and maintained in perpetuity. If that were to not occur, if it were to become damaged or seriously neglected, then the U.S. government would reclaim it.